Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Kaufman. Welcome to our 235th installment of the Torah portion of the week. We are holding by Parshas Shoftim. Parshas Shoftim speaks about establishment of law courts, blemish sacrifice, death penalty for an idol worshiper, the rebellious elder, king in Israel, priestly gifts, prophecy, a lot of different things. Speaks about cities of refuge. Torah tells me in chapter 20, verse 8, it says, the officer shall continue speaking to the people and say, who is the man who is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go return to his house. Let him not melt the heart of his fellows like his heart. Right? People unqualified to fight, to go to war. Right? Certain people who are not allowed to go to war. Right? So, interesting thing. Comes along. Mori Verebi, Arav Agon, Ramosh Stor Machshlita should be well. He brings down in Tam Vadas and his commentary on Chumash, and he says, Torah gives a reason why they're exempt, right? Why essentially are they exempt from going to war? And the whole purpose is what? So they won't make other people weak, right? They won't cause the hearts of their brothers to not want to go to war. Right? To be weak over here. In other words, if they don't go to war, so people around them, they're also not going to want to go to war. Right? It's going to cause a weakness in everybody else. So says Moiver Rebbe, tremendous thing over here. Fundamental principle. What's the fundamental principle? Someone who comes to study all late, or person who comes to learn and he's not really learning, really schmoozing, or he's lazy going to davening, going to pray, right? He's lazy, he gets there late. What is that going to do? You're going to say, okay, so what he does. What does that have to do with anyone else? And the reality is, just like we said over here, he causes a weakness in everybody else. And he's gonna get judged over here. He's gonna get punished. So Rebbe says, better not to enter the study hall than cause others to be weak in their learning, in their studying. Pretty amazing, right? Because what do we see over here? We see that someone who goes to learn, but the reality is they're not really learning. They're schmoozing, speaking about politics, speaking about other things. So you say, who cares? This is what he does. So what does that have to do with anybody else? And what's the answer? Causes a weakness in everybody else. Because people are going to say, oh look, he does this, so why can't I? I should also be allowed to do it. Etc. Or he comes late to pray, or God forbid doesn't pray. Something like that's better. They don't come. They don't come to study hall. Pretty amazing. Right? You can say, okay, they came late, they're schmoozing. Another person has an obligation to learn. So what someone else does doesn't really affect us. It shouldn't affect us. But the problem is, it does. Because when we see someone else doing it, we also do it. We may also do it. And by doing it, it makes everyone else weaker. Right? It makes the whole place weaker. Because the reality is, one person's talking, another person wants to talk. Third person wants to talk. So really, it makes the whole place weaker. Or better, this person doesn't show up. So, Rebbe brings down in the name of Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, former head of the Mir Yeshiva, says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, what's the case of Chilul Hashem? What's the case of desecrating God's name? So one answer is somebody who would walk 8 amos without learning Torah, without saying over Torah. Right? 8 arms lengths. By him, that was the desecration of God's name. So explains Rashi over there. Says, I was weak in my learning. And what are people going to do? Because I was weak in my learning, other people are going to be lazy from learning. Other people are not going to learn. Why? Because they see that I'm not learning. By seeing that I'm not learning, guess what? It's going to have a ripple effect. It's going to make other people weaker. That's the ripple effect. A person like that's dangerous. That's a desecration of God's name. Now, in this case, the person never had bad intention. Certainly never had bad intention. But he's weak in his learning. So even though he doesn't have negative intention, by definition, he's going to make other people weaker in learning. Maybe it's going to cause other people to talk about things they shouldn't talk about while learning. Even to praise God. Right, Ben Yonah brings in Sefer Ayira, the gate of repentance. In the back of the gate of repentance, in the book of fear. He brings down a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, the person's learning, and he praises God and says, wow, what a great tree. What beautiful mountains. What beautiful valleys, whatever. What's the penalty for doing such a thing? Death penalty. Why death penalty? He's praising God over here. He's praising God's creation. So you know why it's death penalty? It's death penalty because he should have been learning. That's really what he should have been doing. So what's he doing? Praising God over here. Praising God's creation. He's wasting time when he could have been learning. I can understand he's talking about sports, talking about politics, talking about other things. But he's praising God. He's praising God over here. What's the problem? What's the problem over here? Problem is he should have been learning. And that is the death penalty. So over here he's causing people speak about things they shouldn't be speaking about, wasting time, making them weaker in Torah. That's the desecration of God's name. Now, desecration of God's name is going to be according to the individual. For some people, right, let's say for most people, if they're walking in the street, they weren't thinking and learning, that's not desecration of God's name. For most people. Right, so Talmud says, no, by certain people, that is desecration of God's name. Depends who. Certainly depends who. So it brings down the Talmud Yerushalmi that the Yerushalmi says in Edrin, chapter 10, halacha 2, right? You want to look it up. Talks about Gehazi. In Gehazi, that he was a student by Elisha, and Elisha taught him, and he stood outside, and his students saw. The students saw what? Students saw who were standing outside, they didn't go in. And the punishment for Gehazi was tremendous. In other words, he should have really been listening to Elisha. He's standing outside, and all the students are standing outside. What did that do? Cause the students not to go in. Right? He's unbelievably punished over here. Now, he didn't have evil intention, but still the punishment is very severe. Because people are going to learn from these bad ways. Right? That's another definition of a desecration of God's name. The fact that people learn bad character traits. Even if that's not your intention. But someone learns a bad character trait from somebody. What does it do? Right? It causes them to do bad things. Or potentially do bad things. That's a desecration of God's name. So a person has to take this to heart. He has to take this mussar to heart. And pay attention not to cause a weakness because of it in others. Otherwise, cause the desecration of God's name. So we have to work hard. Then if we're in a place where we're learning, we shouldn't be speaking words that have nothing to do with learning. All the words we should be talking about are in learning. Right? Not anything else. Because what's that going to do? You're going to speak about other things. Someone else is going to speak about other things. That's never going to be good. It's going to cause an overall weakness. Right? The Rebbe here says, better he never come in. Better he doesn't learn there. Let him go somewhere else. Or let him stay home. But say, what? Why should he learn with other people? Because he's causing them to be weak in their learning. We don't want it. And it's considered desecration of God's name. So he says, for example, where do we see desecration of God's name? If a person comes late to synagogue, or the study hall, let's say, or the prayers, then my Rebbe here says it's got the status of a masis. It's like he's causing other people to go astray. Now, masis, in general, is someone who causes others to go astray by idolatry. He compares it to idolatry over here. And he causes other people to be lenient in different mitzvahs or transgressions, and the sin is tremendously severe. So don't you think if a person goes to learn, goes to pray, where's the liability here? He wants to do the right thing. Okay, so he started talking with somebody, not in learning. What, I'm worried? Other people are going to do the same thing? Yeah, that's what we're worried about. It's going to have a ripple effect. And a ripple effect in general, we're going to say over here, better the person never go to synagogue. Or he doesn't go learn. Why? Because it's going to cause others to go astray. It's going to cause them to be weaker in their learning. That's why over here he calls it a masis. Someone who's going astray after idolatry. Here's unnecessary idolatry. But what it does is it causes other people to be lenient in mitzvah observance, or to being lenient when it comes to transgressions, and the punishment's severe. So I would think person goes to learn, that's not the end of the world. That's a good thing. Not just not the end of the world, it's a good thing. Person goes to learn whatever he's going to learn. But if he's going to speak to others about things that have nothing to do with learning, waste of time. Absolute waste of time. Better he doesn't come to synagogue. I can understand. You say that the punishment's severe, I get it. But to say that he shouldn't go to synagogue, he shouldn't go to learn, that's how severe it is. We wouldn't necessarily have thought that. Okay, maybe Torah's going to have a positive effect. He won't do that. Or realize the mistake he's making. Problem is, damage is done. He's making a weakness in everybody else. So you can say, who says I have to listen? You're right. We have to concentrate. Person goes to learn, goes to pray, you get there on time. You do what you're supposed to do there. You want to talk about other things, go outside. But the whole purpose of being in synagogue, being in a learning center is learning. It's not about talking about other things. Because what you're doing is other people are going to get these bad vibes. Other people are going to do the same thing. And once you cause other people to go astray like that, you're called to make the punishment severe. Now, before I mention this, person might have said, okay, no one says you have to listen. And if you listen, how bad is the sin? At least you went there to learn. You were in the middle of learning. Torah says otherwise. Torah says it's a very severe thing here. But we take it for granted. See someone you haven't seen in a long time, go over to them, schmooze with them a little bit. But why? You're in the middle of learning. You're in the middle of learning God's Torah. So what are you schmoozing with someone else? What are you schmoozing in the middle of learning? Just like we see by Gechozi. He didn't go in the study hall and all the students didn't as well. Why? They learned bad things from him. But here, the intention is not for evil. Totally not for evil. So if intention isn't for evil, why are we throwing the book at him? Very simple. Because he's making other people weak in Torah learning. He's weakening their resolve. So better he doesn't show up. We wouldn't think that. We wouldn't say it's that severe. We say, I understand it's not a good thing. But to say it's that severe, because essentially you're causing other people to be weak in learning Torah. You're causing them to go in the wrong direction. They're going to learn from your bad character traits. What do we call that in the vernacular? We call that in the vernacular desecration of God's name. Now, a desecration of God's name depends on the person. Depends on where they're holding. Some people may be a desecration of God's name. Other people may not. But you're causing a general overall weakness. So a bunch of people sitting learning together, you can't have this. You got to nip it in the bud because of the negative effect that it has. Right? That we have to be careful of. Even seemingly if it's something permissible to speak about. We're not talking where he's speaking Lashon Hara. We're not talking where, he's saying something bad against someone else. Even if it's permitted over here, he doesn't have negative intention. Or evil intention, let's say better. Is it really that bad? Yeah. Because that brings everybody down. That makes everybody weaker. So says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, can't have it. Somebody like that you cannot have in your study hall. He's just going to cause other people to stop learning. And the whole point of being there, since it's like a mini temple, and that's the closest thing we have to the Beis HaMikdash, our synagogues and study halls. You're speaking God's words. So how can you speak about frivolous things that have no meaning? That's going to cause others to go astray. That's going to make them weaker in Torah learning. That we can't have. Right? Somebody like that, better they don't come. That's how severe it is. But, as we mentioned, it's a ripple effect. And since it's a ripple effect, you get all the transgressions. You absolutely get all the transgressions here. Punishment we can't imagine. Just like we mentioned before about Pirkei Avos. As it says in the ethics of our fathers. Liable for death penalty. You're in the middle of learning, say, wow, what a beautiful tree. God's beautiful creation. You're liable. Because that's not the time to be praising God's creation. It's a time to be learning. That's what we should be doing. So when a person causes someone to stop learning, makes them weaker in learning because they're wasting time, that's a desecration of God's name. That's an absolute desecration of God's name. And the punishment is unbelievably harsh. Which we wouldn't have necessarily thought. So we got to be careful. We go to learn. We go to pray. We do what we're supposed to do there. But you waste time. You waste other people's time. We see what can happen. We see what the punishment is. And how severe it is. So a person goes to learn, that's what they got to do. They got to learn. They hear other people saying things they shouldn't be saying. Go learn somewhere else. Go learn another part of the study. Don't be influenced by them. That's the point. Because you get an obligation to learn. You don't want to fall in their negative ways. Because as we mentioned, the end result, the transgression, is catastrophic. Absolutely catastrophic. I want to remind everyone, I give classes in Duty in the Heart every Tuesday, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. We're in the gate of self-accounting. I have a class on the book of Leviticus, chapter 14, actually chapter 15, every Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 4 o'clock Israel time. I have Tanakh Talk every Monday, 2 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Israel time. Controversial issues. I have class in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, every Saturday, 2:30 Eastern Time, 9:30 Israel Time, 2 Q&As, every Tuesday, Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Israel Time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. You can send me an email, rabbichaimkoffman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com.